through and give us formulas, then we're going to go through and complete the problems. Hopefully you've done that. You can tell us what these formulas are. Guys, the point of doing that is getting you to actually look at the formula sheet, is because that's what you're going to be using when we take the test tomorrow. You're going to have to use that formula sheet on this material. You'll be allowed to get your answers or your formulas off there so that you can complete the problems. Let's start with Pythagorean theorem. What is that? Good. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. What does c have to be? Hypotenuse. It has got to be your hypotenuse. That is the one that goes last. The other two are interchangeable. These are the legs. It doesn't matter if it's leg 1, leg 2, or leg 2, leg 1. It can go in any order. The biggest thing is that c has to go last. So when you're looking at this problem over here, our unknown is on one of the legs. Which one of these numbers is the hypotenuse? Good, no problems there. That is your hypotenuse. You identify that by looking what is across from the right angle. And then you're going to set this up in Pythagorean theorem. Again, it doesn't matter what order these go in at all. I'm going to go 3 square roots of 5 squared plus x squared equals 7 square roots of 4 squared. The only thing that matters is that the hypotenuse goes last. The one we circle, the h, that has to go last. If you don't have the hypotenuse last, this doesn't work, guys. Okay, grab your calculators. Let's type this. Okay, to keystroke wise, I'm going to write it up here just so you see for this first one. 3 times 5 square root equals, and then you are going to square it. Try typing that, see what you get. What's that give you guys? 45? Do we agree on the 45? Okay. Plus x squared equals, do that again for the 7 square roots of 4 squared. 196. Are we in agreement? I just want to make sure we get there. Yeah? Okay. Good. Does anybody need me to type either of those again? You know I will. I just need you to ask. Anybody have any concerns about typing those at all? Can't use the calculator, none of this matters. You got to know how to type them in. Okay, to solve that, you would then minus 45 minus 45. Like in any equation, you got to get the variable by itself. Makes it x squared equals 196 minus 45 should be 151. Yeah, and then square root, square root. So just type 151 on your calculator, hit the square root button. Now remember, all side lengths on the test go to 2 decimals, all angles go to none. So it's a side length, it goes to 2 decimals. What would that be to 2 decimals? 12.29? Everybody agree on the rounding? Did you have to round it up, or did it stay the same?
It was 12.288.
Thank you. So 12.288 with an 8 and an 8 behind it, that is going to round up to 9. Nice. Good. Anybody have any concerns, questions, anything about Pythagorean theorem they need to ask about? Yes, ma'am.
I did something wrong.
On what part? Tell me what you need.
So, when I got close, I got 13.8.
Okay, type the 151 and just hit the square root button real quick. 151, hit square root.
I got 12.28.
It's 12.28 with an 8 after it, and that gives you 12.9. That's what it was. Okay, good. Thank you for saying it. Guys, you got to figure out what it is, because we don't have any more days. Y'all asked for more time, which we did, but we're out of time now. Tomorrow is the test. Don't forget, if you do better on this test than you did on the quiz, I will replace the grade. Some of y'all desperately need to make sure you make the effort to do that. Some of y'all have hundreds in here so far. So you're not one of those people, but there are some of you on the other end that need to be doing something before we get to this test. Okay, we've got a 30-60-90 and a 45-45-90. The first one is the 45-45-90. What do you know on a 45-45-90 about the legs? That they're the same. So mark them congruent before you do anything. If this one is x, this one's also going to be x. The only magic number on a 45-45-90 is what? Radical 2. And since we are going from the leg to the hypotenuse, we would be multiplying by radical 2. That makes this x square roots of 2. That's it. Don't make it complicated. That's what it looks like on your formula sheet. It tells you the magic number. It tells you that this one is going to be square root of 2 more, that many times, because it is multiplication, the length of the leg. So on a problem it says this, if this leg right here is 6 square roots of 2, then this leg is also going to be 6 square roots of 2. Do not write different answers down for the legs, guys. The legs have to be the same. To go from the leg to the hypotenuse, we would be multiplying by the square root of 2. Now, this math, gotta know this math. It's not calculator work, guys. What's square root of 2 times square root of 2? 2. And then 6 times 2 is 12. Guys, what's 2 times 2? 4. And the square root of 4 is 2. If you multiply a radical by itself, it's going to give you that number without the radical sign. Fine. Yep.
I have that also. I squared 6
We don't have a square anywhere on here on this when we do a 45, 45, 90. The only thing we have is the square root of 2. You're either multiplying or dividing by the square root of 2. That's the only two choices you have.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So the only other option would be if we had 6 square roots of 2, and if we were going backwards, let's say that was on the hypotenuse, and we wanted to go backwards, we would divide by the square root of 2. What happens to square root of 2 going this way? They cancel, you'd be left with 6. But again, this is not division, this is multiplication because we're getting bigger. Anybody else? Okay. What is the rule here? Everything is based off the short leg. To go from the short leg to the hypotenuse, what are we multiplying by? 2. Guys, it's on your formula sheet. It tells you exactly what number to multiply by. It tells you that the hypotenuse is twice as big as the short leg. You never go anywhere. You don't ever draw lines unless they connect to the short leg. Never. You're always going to draw lines that go from the short leg. So now that you've got this short leg at x, to go to the long leg, what is the magic number you're multiplying by? Radical 3. So it's going to be x times the square root of 3. The square root of 3 times whatever you started with. 5 square roots of 3 if the short leg's 5. 12 square roots of 3 if the short leg's 12. Whatever it is, multiplied times the square root of 3. The short leg is based, everything is based on the short leg. So guys, this is the short leg in this picture. It's a 30, 60, 90 triangle. Right now, where the number is, that's where we start, and that is on our long leg. To go from the long leg back to the short leg, we're getting smaller, so we're going to divide. And what magic number are we dividing by? Square root of 3. So grab your calculators if you need it, or you don't really type this in on the calculator. Do you see that you've got square root of 3 over 6, or excuse me, 6 over square root of 3? Okay, guys, can you have a radical on the bottom of a fraction? No, so we got to rationalize it, get rid of it. Go ahead and multiply top and bottom by the square root of 3. That's going to make it 6 square roots of 3 all over. The whole point of doing this is the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is 3 with no sign on it. That's the whole point of doing that. Now, the last step you have to do for that one is you are going to have to simplify because these two numbers will divide evenly. And you can simplify that out. What's 6 divided by 3? So your answer is going to be 2 square roots of 3. You can only divide the ones that are outside or the ones inside. You can't do both. Okay? So you're simplifying the ones outside. That gives you 2 square roots of 3. That is our short leg. To go from the short leg to the hypotenuse, we would take this amount and we would be getting bigger. What do we have to multiply by to go from the short leg to the hypotenuse? 2. And so 2 square roots of 3 times 2. What you're really dealing with is multiplying the ones on the outside, just like we divided the ones on the outside here. And 2 times 2 would make it 4 square roots of 3. 4 square roots of 3. Questions, concerns, anything up till there? The rest of it's all trig, guys. Because the trig, I put more on here from trig because trig was the problems that you had the most trouble with on the quiz. So I wanted to try to stick with the ones y'all had the most trouble with. Questions? Okay, here we go. Next section, you got to tell me formulas. What is the formula for sine?
Cosine over
Perfect. Opposite over hypotenuse. What about cosine, guys? Adjacent over hypotenuse. And the only one that doesn't use hypotenuse is tangent. What's that formula? Opposite over adjacent. Perfect. You can also write out SOHCAHTOA to help you remember it. It's also on your formula sheet. Whatever works for y'all guys, use it. You'll be allowed to use the formula sheet on the day of the test. You've got cosine and sine of C. They both are coming off C, so we're going to identify C and how the parts are connected to it. The easiest thing is always to identify the hypotenuse first, because the hypotenuse is across from the right angle. Keeps you from messing up the adjacent side with the hypotenuse. So in this case, across from that right angle is the 10. This is going to be my hypotenuse. Directly across from the C is going to be my opposite, so the 8 is going to be my opposite. And then the one that touches it but is not my hypotenuse is going to be 6. That's my adjacent side. Just on the opposite adjacent hypotenuse. Does anybody have a question how you identify any one of those pieces? Okay. Since we are doing cosine first of C, cosine is going to be adjacent over hypotenuse. What is the fraction going to be for adjacent over hypotenuse? Okay, now listen, you cannot leave it unreduced, so grab your calculators. This was a big problem on the quiz. Type 6 fraction button 10 and it will reduce it down. What is the reduced fraction?
3 over 5. Oh.
Should be 3 over 5. Yep, I'm reducing the fraction, guys. I'm not to the decimal part yet. We're not turning it into a decimal. That's the second part. We haven't finished the fraction part. You have got to reduce your fractions down. This was 6 over 10. That'd be equal to 3 over 5. Then you turn it into a decimal by doing top divided by bottom. Or on this calculator, if you already have it in the calculator, you can hit second and the little arrow at the bottom. That'll also turn it from a fraction into a decimal. Alright? Second and an arrow. If you already have the 3/5 in there, you can just hit second and then the arrow in the bottom corner. What does that give you as a decimal? 0.6. Wonderful. Let's do the next one. For sine. Sine is going to be opposite over hypotenuse. What is the fraction going to be for sine? Okay, grab your calculators, reduce it. 8 fraction button 10 equals, what does that reduce down to? 4 over 5. And then the last thing, second arrow, or 4 divided by 5, what's that give you as a decimal? 0.8. Questions, concerns, anything on that section? Because that was not the best section on the quiz. You understand that on that section, you're not hitting the sine, cosine, or tangent button. You're writing out the ratios and turning it into decimal. You're not finding the sine of anything. You're not finding the cosine of anything. You're just setting it up. Okay. Last section is going to be the trig right here. For this trig, each one of these is going to have a little bit different. Well, actually, the first two are very similar. So we're going to do the first one together. I'm going to get y'all to do this one, then we'll do the last one together again. So always mark your angle. Decide what parts the x and the 5 are. How is the x in this triangle? Is it opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse? Adjacent. What is the 5 in this triangle? Hypotenuse. It's got adjacent and hypotenuse. In the adjacent and hypotenuse, you're going to be doing sine, cosine, or tangent if you have those two things. Cosine. Cosine of the angle 7 equals the adjacent x over the hypotenuse 5. Okay. Solving that one, you need to get rid of the 5, so we multiply both sides by 5. Now, I did have somebody ask a really good question today. Does it matter what order you type it in? The answer is yes. That's why I rewrite it like this. 5 times cosine of 7 equals x. She was typing the 7 first and then doing it the way we were doing it, and you got to be careful because the order you type it in decides what it takes the cosine up. So to type this, it would be 5 times 7 cosine equals. 5 times 7 cosine equals. Now this is a side length, so I need it to 2 decimal places. Type that, tell me what you get. What does that round to? 496 or 4.96? Okay, I just want to make sure. I thought it was a decimal, but I just want to make sure. 4.96 equals x. Does anybody need me to go over typing buttons for that? Okay, clear it out.
Oh, yeah, I just had a question.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
How do you know, like, how to write it, like, in that specific order?
What part of it do you mean? I'm trying to figure out what you're asking me.
Like the 5, parentheses.
Because I'm multiplying this whole thing by 5 when I do this, so I'm putting that 5 out in front, and that cosine 7 stays together in that. I got to keep the 7 connected to that cosine 7. So whatever you multiply on the top just goes in front. Yep. Anybody else? Okay, here we go. So 4.96 is the answer to that one. Anybody need me to type anything on that? Everybody have a question? Okay, the next one is almost identical. You got this 25 right here. The only difference is that you are using a different trig function. So when you're doing a different trig function on here, how is the 25 related to that x? It is opposite. And how is the 18 related? Adjacent. If it's opposite and adjacent, which trig function is that going to leave you? Tangent, perfect. Of 25 equals what over what? Perfect. Okay, get to an answer. Don't say it. Get to a final answer on that one. Question or? Okay. Since I know I want to do the last one with you because it's got an angle in it, I want to type that one with you. Okay, if you get an answer, compare with the people around you. See if they've got the same thing. Get to a final answer, then compare. We'll see if we can get everybody to the right thing at this point. Okay, what's the answer, guys? 8 point what? 39. Let's see. Times 18 times 18, that'd be 18 times 10, 25 equals x, because these cancel out. So when I type that, be 18 times 25 tangent equals 8.39 is correct. Nicely done. Nicely done. Okay guys, the last one is going into an angle being missing. When we go to an angle being missing, 1, we're doing the inverse function. 2, there are no decimals. We do not want a decimal. We want a whole number. We want it to be rounded to the nearest degree, so no decimals. And you have to know when to do that. Anytime it's on the inside, anytime it's an angle, that's when you're going to be doing no decimals. So to set this up, this has got a piece right here on the angle. This is going to be the opposite on 3 and your hypotenuse on 15. With opposite and hypotenuse, which one of your trig functions would you use? Sine, sin, doesn't matter what you call it. That's going to be x equals the opposite 3 over the hypotenuse 15. Now it's unusual because when you have one that's the angle, you will have the sine of that angle. So it's going to be sine x, sine y, sine whatever variable you're doing. And then you're going to make it the inverse function. So you're going to make it sine negative 1, and you're going to switch these two things. That's what the inverse function does, is switch those two. So that you now have sine negative 1 of 3 over 15 equals x. Sine negative 1, the inverse function of sine, 3 over 15, and it equals x. Now it's a matter of typing it. So clear out your calculator. Let's make sure we can type this one. And this has to round to no decimals. None. So to type this would be 3 fraction button 15 second sine. You can hit equals, but it won't change the answer. 3 fraction button 15 second sine. What does that give you to the nearest whole number? 12. Okay, now I have one more thing to challenge you on that, because this was a very good question brought up by another person that was in my class. So I'm going to add a y right here. Please add that onto your paper. If I want to find y, I do not want to do trig again. I want to make my life easy. If I already know this one is 12 and this one is 90, I'm going to say 12 plus 90 is going to give me 102. I'm going to subtract that from 180 because every triangle on earth adds up to 180. And 180 minus 102 is going to leave you 78. That would be your y. Questions? Yes.
So you only do the, like, the negative one thing when the x is in the, like, angle?
It doesn't have it. I have to be careful how I say this. I think what you're saying is you only use it when you're finding angles, but I want to make sure that's what you mean. It's only when the x or y is on the inside
Okay.
when you're finding the angles. I think that's what you asked, but I just want to make sure that's what you
Yeah, that's what I was
asked.
asking.
Yeah. It's a good question. I just need to make sure I answer the right question. Yes.
Can you talk about finding,
To do the last part, the finding the y or finding the x?
finding the S, can you like type out?
This part right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. 3 fractionment and 15. Second sign. 3 fractionment 15, second sign. Anybody else? Okay, so this is what we're going to do. Take and open up your folders to your warm-up section. Please put this in your warm-up section and write down today's date on warm-up 3-3. Okay, on the third warm-up, put today's date down. Once you do that, take out the homework that I gave you yesterday. Take the homework out that I gave you yesterday. The answers to the homework that we did yesterday, well, in here, but last Friday. These are the answers to that worksheet. Okay? You need to correct that. This is your very last opportunity to ask any questions. You're going to get the C worksheet, so if you've got 100 on that, then you can go and start on this. And you're going to see, I cut it like way down. You're going to see a bunch of missing numbers. I knew that we'd be doing this warm-up. I didn't want to give you a ton of stuff to do. You should be able to finish this last worksheet very easily, this C worksheet. But I want to answer questions on B before we move on. Again, if you look at B and you grade through it and you got 100%, move on. I've only had I think I had 3 in one class and 4 in the other class as far as questions. So it's just up to you what you need to do to see this and be able to understand this. So I'm going to start taking questions on B. Let me get my recording stopped so I can post that warm up for today.